Hi, everyone. This is Jose Velazquez with HireMilitary. Super excited to bring you two amazing veterans today in hopes of inspiring you and preparing you for your transition, your military transition, and hopefully giving you some advice along the way to help you maybe not hit some of the pitfalls that they may have. But first, I want to say that this segment is sponsored by American Corporate Partners. ACP's free mentoring program connects vets, active duty, and military spouses with leading industry voices and corporate professionals for customized mentorships. Find your next career with ACP. So here we go. And let me introduce VeShannah Lovelace. She's an event producer with on the live events team for Ramsey Solutions. And also Don Sparks, retired public affairs sergeant major extraordinaire. And he is a public affairs specialist for U.S. Army South in San Antonio. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So listen, today what I'd like to do is just begin a conversation with you and bring in some comments from folks who may have an interest in learning more about you, but also about your incredible journey. And more than anything, because so many of us are in this process of transitioning. And for folks who have already on the right side of Blue ID Card Day, many of us are still transitioning. It takes a while. And so, we'd love to get your thoughts and your experience and maybe, some ideas as to, some pitfalls that you may have hit or some lessons that you learned or some best practices. So before we start, though, VeShannah, tell us a little bit more about your experience. And you've been out how long now?
I retired on August 1st, 2016. So yeah, it's been about 4.5 years now since I've been a civilian. And my process was a little different. I took 2 years off from working altogether so that I could go back to school and get my graduate degree. And then after I got that, then I went back into the workforce.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you are working?
So I'm working for Ramsey Solutions. It's a Dave Ramsey company, and I'm on the live events team. So basically what we do is we put on events around the country, and I'm on the team that actually puts those events together and produces those events.
That's awesome. Dave Ramsey, that's a big deal. And I know he's got a huge organization, so that's amazing.
Yes.
Don, tell us some more about yourself as you transitioned.
Well, I retired. My official retirement date was May 31st, 2018. And I moved to San Antonio, Texas from Killeen, Fort Hood. And once I arrived here, I went straight to work 2 months after retiring. Within that year, I worked 2 jobs. Then I took a year off because, I felt like I really needed to give myself that mental break and take care of a lot of those physical things that we neglect, as far as take care of ourselves while we're in uniform. And then I just started working again last summer at U.S. Army South, doing something I said I never was going to do, be a GS, working back for the Army again.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Oh, my goodness. Well, listen, I want to invite anyone who's watching us to jump in the comment section and ask any questions that you might have of Donald or VeShannah. So they led long, very successful careers. And they've had this incredible journey as they transitioned. VeShannah went to school. So for those of you that may be going through that process and deciding to go to school on the way out, and of course, both of them have experienced great success as they transitioned as well. So we'll go with that. But let's get started with a little bit more about your experience. So VeShannah, you did go to school for a while, and then once you completed that, you went on. So were you a little bit nervous as you went through this transition process, and how did you deal with that?
I'll be honest, I was perfectly confident in my transition process, but I was confident because I put in the work beforehand. So my transition started 2 years before I actually retired. So I knew that in 2014, I was planning to retire in 2016. So at that point, I went through the whole transition process. I started taking all the classes that I needed to take, all the Soldier for Life classes. And I got that out of the way really early on, and then repeated some of those classes over the course of the next 2 years. I put together an extensive reading list. that included books on careers, because at the time I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had 3 ideas. I was either going to be the next Olivia Pope, and I was going to do crisis management, or I was going to go buy me a house and then run a bed and breakfast somewhere in Nashville, or I was going to go be an event planner. And so what I did was I bought career books, all those three in all those 3 categories. I figured out pretty quick. I think the book on running a bed and breakfast was probably like 20 chapters. By chapter 4, I already knew I was not going to do that. I read a book about, being a crisis manager. It was a very good book, but by the end of the book, I decided I really didn't want to work that hard in retirement. And I really didn't want to be stressed out over other people's problems. And so when I read the book on event planning, I just got heart palpitations. Like, I just got so excited. I got the butterflies, like everything about it excited me. And that's what told me that that was what I needed to do when I retired.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Tiffany asks, what books would you recommend? And I know you had a long, extensive list, but specific to transition, do you have a couple that you might want to share?
I do. The first one is 48 Days to the Work You Love by, I think it's Dan Miller. It's either Dan Miller. Yeah, I think it is Dan Miller. But 48 Days to the Work You Love. And the other one is What Color is Your Parachute? Oh, yeah. Both of those books were really good. The one thing I will say about 48 Days to the Work You Love is it made me realize that what you want to do might not look like what you expected it to look like. So like, say for instance, you want to teach, but that doesn't mean you need to sit in a classroom in front of a bunch of kids to teach. There are other ways to teach. There's more ways that are, there's more ways to make better money teaching, basically, than sitting in front of a classroom. So it just made you open your eyes to think about, these are different ways that you can do this particular career field that you probably wouldn't have thought of. And it just makes you think outside the box.
No, that's great. And I mean, I think a lot of that ends up being part of this whole networking process as we transition, figuring out what we want to do, engaging with people, obviously literature as well. So Tiffany also asked, what's the best way to network now with COVID-19? And I know you all transitioned right before this craziness. So of course, VeShannah, you've been out a little while, but you're having to deal with that in the corporate sector as well. Don, what's your take on this networking during the COVID timeframe?
I think taking advantage of platforms like LinkedIn. There are plenty of times I see people who know somebody that I know. Right. And if they know somebody that I know, and I know that person is reputable, I know that person has great ethics, I know that person has been a solid professional, I have to assume that all of us like to keep good company. So going through your friends and going through their friends, that's how you grow your circle. So I've met people that I've never met face to face, but I can see I've had some type of relationship with them professionally, as you talk about, in my case, photojournalism or public affairs or leadership development. So I would say just be willing to expand your circle to meet people and get advice from people that you may not meet face to face.
That's great. That's great. Shauna?
I wanted to add to that too. Networking is not really just about like finding people out there who have similar interests and then asking them for something. Networking is about building relationships. So like, say for instance, I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask me to help them get a job here. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. I'm going to need you to do your own work, because there are ways that you can look into getting a job here, not just asking me to tell somebody to call you, because that's not how it works. Like, you need to, like when I got here, I actually went through the website and I actually was very involved in all the content they put out. And so I just started volunteering. Whenever they do an event, you can go to that city. You can sign up to volunteer with that event. I volunteered for 5 events. I got to know the team that I wanted to work on, and I made connections with people on the team. So when I finally did apply, I had names that I could put on my resume.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I couldn't agree more with both of you. The very first part of networking is showing your value to someone else, because when you show up and, and this occurs all the time for those of us that are kind of in the training coaching space, with LinkedIn and digital networking, it's not uncommon for people to send us, hey, here's my resume, check it out and get back to me by Tuesday. And you're like, who? Get back to me by Tuesday? What are you talking? Who are you? I don't even know who you are. How about hello first? And so it's really important for people to understand that networking isn't about, and I know we're used to being in the military sometimes, and you're just used to telling people what to do. That's not the way it works on the way out. And before you ask for anything, the best thing you can do is show some value by being a team player, by contributing in some way initially, and then sure, at some point you can ask someone for a favor or to step in for you or to say something nice about you in preparation for your submitting a resume or that kind of thing. But initially you definitely have to be the one to show some value. That's my thought process. So listen, I've got some folks that are asking questions. Don, someone's asking about GS positions. What advice can you give to individuals? Sorry, VeShannah, I know you're hiding your face here. Individuals who are looking to transition into a GS position once they retire. He's active duty with 19 years, finishing his master's. Are there any certain certifications or higher education?
Well, again, initially, like I said, I had no desire to go into the GS field, but I think, where I'm at here in San Antonio, there's plenty of GS positions available. And after taking my year off, I think it comes down to, if there's a job that's out there at a location that you're going to be living in, you got to read what that job entitles. You also have to make sure that you not only have your own personal resume, but initially I was just sending my personal resume, but I wasn't doing the actual resume on USA Jobs because I felt like my personal resume was more solid than what USA Jobs would have required.
Right.
But believe it or not, they really do look at your resume on USA Jobs and not really look at your personal resume per se. So I had to really just transfer from my resume, my personal resume, and make sure it fit the format and make sure those keywords, if those keywords for that job description is not in your resume, that's gonna hold you back. So you have to make sure that that your resume is tailored to fit what that job is asking for, because if not, you're not going to get it. As far as education, I know there's two thoughts. People say you have to have a degree or degree and experience, but some people may not have had the opportunity to complete their degree requirements. I don't think that's a hindrance. They can look at your experience and your rank and see what you've done. And that's why your resume is so important, to capture what you've done and make sure in capturing what you've done, it matches what that job description is looking for.
Yeah, and I recently heard a study that was done amongst job seekers that women tend to be more introspective when they're putting their resumes together, and if there's something missing, they will err on the side of not submitting that application versus a man who might say, they'll figure it out, or I'll figure it out on the way in. And so I recommend that, if you feel like you can still get this done, or you have enough chops in other areas that might make up for an education deficiency, then you should still apply. I mean, what do you think, Shanna?
I definitely agree with that. I don't feel like there might be 10 things that you need to know how to do to qualify for this job, but you only know how to do 6. You apply anyway. And then you convince that person that you're a fast learner, that you're very ingenuitive, and that you can figure it out, because some of that stuff might be stuff that is better learned on the job anyway. Some of that stuff might be stuff that they'd rather train you to do, because if you're doing it the way you learned how to do it somewhere else, you're not doing it the right way anyway, or at least you're not doing it their way. Right. So never shortchange yourself just because you don't have every single specific attribute that they're looking for in a job. You go for it regardless.
Yeah.
And I agree with what VeShannah said. You have to make sure that you show yourself as trainable. You can't, yes, you are a subject matter expert, you know a lot of things, but if you walk in the door and you're not trainable, you're not willing to learn something new, that's right there, it's going to be a hindrance to you. I was actually told by the person who hired me that he doesn't he's never hired officers. He's only hired former enlistment because he know enlisted people will do the work. So I guess his mentality is that somebody who's coming in to a position that they're willing to learn and be trainable and taught a different way of doing things, whether than somebody who's coming in is my way or no way at all. So you got to make yourself trainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you another tip for those that are networking online and trying to set up their LinkedIn profiles to best represent themselves. You know, there is the skills section, and a lot of times what may be a deficiency, you may be able to make up for, at least in matching skills to skills in that section. So I encourage people to go to their profiles, go down to the skills section, and you can add up to 50 skills. And I mean, anybody who's been in the military longer than a couple of years probably has 50 skills. And if they just have to do some introspection and figure out what those skills are and what skills pertain to what they want to do as they move forward. A lot of times I joke, I say my top 3 skills initially were military, defense, and government. And I was like, well, I don't want a military anymore. So I'm not going to be searching for a military job. I might work in government, I guess, depended. And then the other one was DOD. I wasn't going to go DODing. So I went and looked for skills that made sense with what I wanted to do as I move forward. So absolutely. Steve has a good point. You have to be able to take the rejection too, and that may come. And I think that's part of the process, and we have to accept that.
I would like to add, though, if you're getting rejected, push further and find out why you're being rejected. Find out how you can improve so that this rejection leads to your next exception.
That's great. No, absolutely. And I'll tell you the other thing is, and this goes back to what you all were talking about initially, was the importance of networking. And we go back to the whole point of sometimes, you'll send a resume, cold from a website, from a Glassdoor or an Indeed or whatever, and you don't hear. And I see this especially with people that are maybe a year out, year and a half out. They'll throw these things out there and hope to get something back because, I'm a cool sergeant major and obviously I know everything. And so people are just going to be desperate to scoop me up, right? And once you get a couple of those rejections in, you begin to kind of doubt yourself and you begin to wonder, why won't people call me back? What's going on? And like VeShannah said, you got to get some advice from someone, a trusted source, a mentor, someone that's not going to tell you what you want to hear, but it's going to tell you what you need to know.
I'll tell you, I kept a Google folder. I still have that Google folder with all my rejections. And I had at one point probably over 100 rejections, maybe more, for jobs I was applying for. But also going to job fairs and you talk to those headhunters and you show them, and they can let you know too what's either too much in your resume or what's missing from your resume. So I was really, I took a lot of notes, and I also said, hey, is there an opportunity where I can talk to you away from this job fair and get more advice? And believe it or not, those people are more than willing to share their advice with you to help you tailor your resume, if not for their organization, for another organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Virginia. Oh, go ahead, please.
I just want to tap on what Courtney Ward said. She said, how are you supposed to find out why you were rejected? Yeah. You just go back to the hiring manager. Just go back to the hiring manager and say, hey, I know that I wasn't the right fit for this job. Could you tell me why? Or could you tell me anything that I could improve upon that would maybe help me know the next time around? But whoever rejected you, you really just have to go back to that person and find out why.
Yeah, absolutely. And Virginia was asking about, building, or not asking, she was recommending, building different resumes dependent on the situation. I think we can all agree that's incredibly important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you want to have a basic resume, but your basic resume has to be tweaked for each job. Like you can't send in the same resume to every job because every job's not looking for the same thing. So you have to tweak your resume for that job, and you have to make your resume fit what that job is looking for.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I recommend to people as well. I think people will post, especially when you're going through the transition services for the military. A lot of times you'll create for example, LinkedIn, which is an incredible professional tool. you'll create this profile, and then you just imagine that it's cemented somehow. It's kind of like some people with resumes. This is my lifetime of experience. Well, great. But most jobs are not looking for a generalist. They're looking for a specialist, someone that can do this thing, turn this wrench, do this particular thing. And I think a lot of the general skills help you, expand yourself once you get in the door. But most jobs tend to be, hey, I need someone to do this thing. Can you do this thing? And so your resume needs to speak to that. And I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that your LinkedIn profile should do that as well. So it's okay to keep all that information, but really you should be keeping the information on LinkedIn that's specific to where you want to go. Hey, Tiffany wants you to mentor her.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just send me a message.
There you go. Hey, this is a great question from Michael, and I'm going to read it off the side because I don't want to cover VeShannah again. But do you believe age is a factor in finding these positions? Michael was an Intel NCO for 10 years, got out. He's been a retail manager for 13. He's moved to North Carolina, just turned 50. He's back to job searching again. What are your thoughts on age in the civilian sector?
I don't think it's an issue. When I retired, I joined the Army in 1988. I was 19. So by the time I retired, I was near my 50th birthday when I was going out to the job market. And I was able, again, 2 jobs in 1 year that I was able to find employment. I don't think it's my age that there was a hindrance at all. I think it was just more that they want to know if you're a right fit, that you're, again, willing to learn, willing to be trainable, and be able to adapt to that particular organization's business culture. Mm-hmm. So you can't come in. I couldn't walk in the door saying, I'm sorry, Major Sparks. No, I have to walk in that door saying, I'm Mr. Sparks, and I'm here to be a part of the team. And how can I help this team benefit? And what can I do to learn to make this team better? So age, I don't think is a hindrance. If you have a good resume, you have a good, when you do your interview, again, the interview process is how are you going to fit on this team? They already see what you can do on your resume, but they're not comfortable with you based off the interview, based off if you're not a team player. That's what I think will shun people from hiring you.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. Being in the military, especially when you're a senior NCO, you're constantly working for people that you probably could have put a diaper on. And that's one of those things that they're concerned about sometimes is, are you going to be able to take leadership from someone who's half your age? Are you going to be able to take leadership from someone who's probably young enough to be your child? I mean, I work with plenty of people that were born the year I graduated high school, but the thing is, I don't treat them like children. And I don't feel intimidated by the fact that they're younger than me, but they may have a higher position than me. And so I think being in the military helps us with that. And so at some point, if it comes up, that might be one of those things that you need to point out. It's like, hey, I'm used to being led by lieutenants.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. That's actually a great analogy because inevitably I absolutely agree with you. And, something I've noticed on LinkedIn a lot of times is, people will get very defensive in the comments whenever someone says, you're not coming out as Colonel so-and-so, you're not coming out as Sergeant Major so-and-so or Senior NCO or, Chief Petty Officer, whatever the case may be. You're getting your first name back and you're going back out there. And I think people get defensive because, it is a lifetime's worth of experience and it's built you. But it's not who you are. And both of you kept your identity throughout your entire careers. How hard was that for you? And if it wasn't difficult, any thoughts that you might have on people either maintaining that or relearning it on the way out of their military career?
For me, I think it was easier to stay VeShannah for 20 years because I never expected to do 20 years. I think at some point, I did turn from VeShannah to Sergeant First Class Lovelace, but I still had a life outside the military. And I'll say this too, it also helped that before I joined the military, I went to college and I got my bachelor's degree, and I worked in radio. Mm-hmm. So there was always the experience outside the military prior to the experience inside the military. So when it was time for me to go back outside the military, I did have to, I'm not going to lie, there was a little bit of challenge in the transition, and it wasn't so much a rank thing as it was a military mentality thing. Mm-hmm. I'll say, for instance, I'll give you a good example. When I was in school and I was working on a class project. Now, in the Army, I'm a journalist. That means I'm writing a story, I'm taking photos, I'm doing the layout, I'm doing the editing. I'm a one-man shop, And so I was working on a project with another young lady who was a younger student, and we were putting together this training that we were going to do for this imaginary business. And I'm like, well, we got to do this, we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to train them to do that. And the girl looked at me and she said, "No, we don't. We're not trainers. We're planners. You hire trainers." And I was like, oh. Mm-hmm. So I had to get used to not being a one-man show. Even here in this current job, my team will sometimes say, "You're not a one-man show. You can ask for help."
Yeah. Yeah.
I think on the flip side, I've prepared myself for retiring from the uniform years in advance, because I always knew that one day the uniform is going to come off. And I think that's a shock for a lot of people, that up until they retire from the uniform, they are shocked that the uniform is coming off. I knew my uniform was going to come off, and I want to make sure that once I took off the uniform and hung it in the closet, that's where it stays. I'm not putting it on again, not even for Veterans Day. But so that was my mentality, that I'm going to be Mr. Sparks or Donald Sparks and do what Donald Sparks wants to do. On the flip side, we talk about the experience that you bring. Sometimes you can be seen as intimidating to the person who's above you. And I experienced that at my first job post-retirement, that because I had so much experience and I would try to bring ideas to, advance the team and do things, my supervisor was, she was intimidated. So it did lead to a little, toxic culture between her and I, to the point that I felt like that, I'm not here trying to hurt the team. I'm trying to help the team. But if I didn't talk to my subordinates that way, I'm not going to take it from somebody else. So right. I did a clean break. So you're also going to feel that sometimes, that some people will be intimidated because they know that you have lots of experience, world experience, culture, your job set. And even though they hire you, may initially seem like you're the perfect fit. Over time, they may feel that, you're a threat.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. Hey, by the way, as you guys were talking, I'm watching the comments, and I just want to thank everyone who's in the comments section for supporting each other. And many of you are answering each other's questions that may not be specific to what we're talking about, but I appreciate it. Alex is a very smart Marine Corps veteran. He's got a bachelor's in logistics. Somebody scoop him up quick. All right, there you go. So let's have a quick conversation about your transition itself. So what challenges did you have? Just practical challenges that you may be able to share with us, or some lessons learned that you were going through as you were transitioning.
Ooh, let's see. Go ahead, Donald.
I think for me, not taking advantage of all the resources that are out there. You hear about the different resources, when you're going through the SFL tab, but there are so many hidden resources and jewels out there. Like even it's something that's USO. I wish I had taken advantage of the USO and the services that they offer way sooner than when I did, as I was getting ready to retire. So I think just, making sure that not every retirement service is going to fit your need, but don't be shy at thinking about an organization that's right there in front of you that you didn't even contemplate using.
That's good.
And I'll just say, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but I didn't have a single transition issue, because I treated my transition like a project. Like, my transition was a part-time job. And like I said, I spent 2 years working on it, meaning that I figured out how much money I needed to have in the bank so that I could live comfortably without working for those 2 years that I went back to school. And I had money in the bank for that, so that in the summertime and in the wintertime, when I didn't get that BAH check, there was money in the bank so that I could pay my rent. I made sure that there was money in the bank so that when I had to go out and buy a civilian wardrobe several times because of all the weight you gained after you retired, I had the money to just keep going out and buying clothes. Like, I knew all the things that I was probably going to need money for, and I had 2 years to build up that savings account so that when I got out financially, it would be a smooth transition. And then I spent all the time working to get into graduate school. Like, I mean, I had 3 different tutors, and I started at the 4th grade math level because I knew I had to take the GRE, and VeShannah don't do math. I'm sorry. But so I had a 4th grade tutor for a few months. Then I went on to an 8th grade tutor before I went on to someone who actually tutored me on the GRE prior to applying for grad school. I knew where I was going to live. I knew where I was going to live as soon as I graduated from grad school. I knew that because I moved to Nashville. I didn't have this job when I moved here. I graduated from grad school and I moved here with money in the bank to sustain me until a position became available at the job that I wanted. And when the job became available, then I applied. But I mean, I prepared. And like I said, I treated it like a project. I spent 2 years preparing in every way, mentally, financially, spiritually, every way that I could, so that when it was time for me to transition, I didn't have any issues.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge I had was not sure where I was going to call home. Because for 30 years in the Army, I bounced around. I never bought a home while I was in the military because I knew I was going to be somewhere 2 years or less.
Yeah.
As I was getting close to transition, that's when I met my wife. So I had to throw in that element. You know, she was already living here in San Antonio. I'm from Houston. So I was looking at jobs in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. And what boiled down to me was, you know, location for as, you know, housing market, what's going to be the best housing market, other tangibles. But that was a huge part for me, not knowing where I was going to settle, and then convincing a woman that I married to uproot from where she was at in San Antonio to possibly going to Houston or up the road to Austin. But, you know, she wanted to vote in San Antonio is where I'm at.
Smart man.
Yes.
Oh, man. Well, look, I'll tell you, I love what you both are talking about, because it really is, when people ask, you know, how far along, you know, should you be preparing to transition? The answer is as early as possible, the entire time, because sooner or later, we're all going to have to take the uniform off. And I'll tell you, unfortunately, I've seen some of the worst transition habits coming out of many senior people who are dedicated to their boss and are dedicated to their job. And I respect that. I respect the heck out of that. But you really have to be somewhat selfish. And you know what? You've earned it. Especially if it's a planned process and people are smart and your leadership is doing the right things to help you. It's so incredibly important for you to take that time for yourself, because any mistake that you make that last year in the military can be compounded for years in getting that thing fixed, whatever that mistake is. So I love what VeShannah was talking about with preparing financially as early as you can. You know, and many of us make mistakes financially when we're younger, going through our careers. But once once retirement is within eyeshot, you really need to get in there and start working on those finances so that you have some freedom as you transition into civilian life to do the things that you need to do and not have to take the very first job that comes out, comes your way.
Financial aspect is key, because what if you don't want to work, you know, for a year after retirement? You want, you know, if your retirement check and your disability based off how much percentage you get, if that's enough to sustain you for a year based off your savings, that's good too. But I would definitely say, you got to incorporate that into your thinking too. If you don't want to work, VeShannah was in school for 2 years, so she was still able to get the GI Bill. She had, some income coming in, but unless you're going to school and getting that GI Bill, that BAH that they give you, that income that you're getting is all you're going to have.
Yeah.
So if you're not financially set, it'll be a tough year.
Yeah. And I want to say another thing too is start thinking about what you want to do when you get out. I talk to so many people who are actually out and still don't know what they want to do. For me, my thing was I spent 20 years working within my career field. So basically, I had my undergrad was in mass communications. My first 7 years in the military, I did photography and videography. I switched over to public affairs and journalism. So I'm still working within my career field, but I figured out I didn't want to stay in that career field when I became a civilian. I figured out that I want to go do something that I love, that I'm passionate about doing, something that I would do even if I didn't get paid to do it. And when I tell you I volunteered for 5 events before applying for this job, I figured out volunteering for those 5 events, that those events gave me energy and they gave me life. I enjoyed doing what I was doing and I did it for free. So I was going to enjoy it even more if I was getting paid for doing it. So, find what you're passionate about and go out there and live your passion.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think a lot of people, and I'll tell you, especially people who are retiring, who have that retirement check as a foundation, that is so incredibly important because I think a lot of people, and VeShannah, you were so good at what you did, throughout your career. And so it could have been the easy route is just saying, well, I'm really good at this, so I'm just going to keep doing it. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was an HR professional, and he surprised me. He said, yeah, I'm going to go do this program and do this particular job. And it was completely outside of HR. And I was like, oh, but I thought you were an HR guy. And he was like, I hate paperwork. But he said, I'm really good at it, but I hate doing it. And he said, and he was about a year ahead of me. And he said, Jose, whatever you do, no matter how good you were at it in the Army, if you don't like it, don't do it after you leave. And that was some great advice. And while I do absolutely love what I do, I do fully appreciate the fact that some people are going to move on to other things. So that's really good. That's really good. So let me see. Some other people want to have conversations with you guys offline. So reach out to Don and VeShannah offline if you want to have direct conversations.
Hit me up.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me.
Yeah. So some folks are, Ted earlier said he had 6 years left. He's made a firm decision to start that process now. And, that's in some respects that can be difficult unless you have a hard retention control point date where that's it, you're done. The military is going to tell you to sayonara. There's this kind of that time frame where you're not sure, am I staying? Am I going? And so a lot of service members tend to push it off to the right. But the reality is there has to come a point where you make a decision, and that can't be 3 weeks out. That's a humongous mistake. And I think Don really touched on it, is using those resources. I know Don used a lot of them, and he didn't just think inside the box, but like you said, the USO and other programs. What other programs did you use that were successful for you?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I also look for what the state offers. Texas has a Texas Workforce Commission, and as part of that Texas Workforce Commission, they have a veteran office that helps veterans as well. So again, that's something I would not have thought about. Normally you think of Workforce Commission, you think of people who are unemployed trying to, in essence, you're about to be unemployed. Yeah. So using the Texas Workforce Commission here, and again, just job fairs. I took advantage of every job fair I can go to here in the city.
Yeah. Good. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
For me, it was a little different because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I used what was available to me in the Army because it was available to me, and it got me, some different information. So like I did all the Soldier for Life classes. I did a bunch of the different resume classes. I did the Boost to Business class. So they were all resources of information, but overall, I didn't really use any programs other than the books that I found that I read. I listened to different podcasts. That was my biggest thing is I listened to business podcasts, because I knew that I wanted to go into the private sector. I was getting away from military altogether. And so I went to a lot of different business podcasts. Entree Leadership Podcast was probably one of the biggest ones, where I listened to people speak about HR and hiring practices. And I got a lot of advice on those different types of things. I learned how businesses operate, you know, by listening to these podcasts, so that I could figure out, okay, well, how can I contribute, you know, to a business in this regard? When I went back to school, I took the class. I didn't take the fun classes, although all my classes were fun, but I took the classes that were going to help me be better and be more valuable to, you know, to an organization. Like, I wanted the wine drinking class, but I didn't take the wine drinking class. I took the venue management class so that I could learn from my perspective how to work with venues based on their perspective of selling their venue. So yeah, I didn't use a lot of government resources. I used a lot of private sector resources. And I will say this, I went to a whole lot of job fairs. I just did that for something to do. They didn't work for me because I had a very specialized field that I was looking for, and those aren't going to be at job fairs.
Right.
And I'll also add on anything that you can do to help you through the interview process. Any class you can take, any lectures, any books you can read, because those interviews, once you get inside the door, you know, with USAA, I worked there as a contractor. When the interview that I did with the senior vice president for claims for USAA, we spent an hour doing the interview. 50 minutes of that interview was talking about everything but USAA. The last 10 minutes of that interview, we talked about the job. So you got to be able to go in and confidently tell who you are and be personable. Yeah. You know, again, they want to know if you're going to be a good fit to the team. They can see from your resume that you're capable and that you have the experience to do the job. They want to know if you're going to be a good fit. So, you know, just taking time to, you know, do interviews. There are a couple of jobs that you had to do the interview video. You have to answer a question, which is, you know, shocking. You get about a minute to basically think about what you're going to say. Then you have to turn the camera on and you see yourself. So practice what it's like to see yourself conducting an interview as well. Because when you see yourself on that, even now as we're talking through Zoom, you can see your body language, you know, your facial expressions. Those same things are visible to that HR person on those during that interview process or on those videos. So just practice.
Yeah, that's great, because I wanted to share with everybody that instead of waiting till it really counts, the LinkedIn program now has an AI interview portion that allows you to answer questions that are common questions that you would get, not just general questions, but more specific questions targeted toward particular fields. And you can go to the job section, click on the tab, and you'll see interview prep. And you can actually record yourself answering the questions. And then the AI program will share with you how many ums and ahs you said, whether your pacing was good or bad, and some particular things. And then if you want to, you can also send that in a DM to a mentor, a colleague, or someone that can provide you with some feedback, which is great, because I wish I had that, you know,
great tool.
Yes. Because, you know, if you can do it before it actually matters, before, you know, it's going to count toward getting a job or not getting a job. If you screw it up, it's always best to give that a try. So, yeah, go ahead, please.
Someone asked the question, and I didn't want to skip over this. They asked the question about they're transitioning from overseas.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know if I think he said, should he look for the job first or the location where he wants to live first? Mm-hmm. Right. And so I would say a lot of people because I was overseas when I started my transition process. I was actually in Italy, and a lot of people that I was going through the program with, they wanted to know, no, they didn't care about where they lived. All they cared about was the job. And then there's other people who cared about where they lived, but didn't necessarily care about the job. So you got to figure out what's important to you. Do you have enough experience around the country to know where it is that you want to be and why you want to be there? Do you have options? Can you go somewhere, live somewhere temporarily, just to decide. Like for me personally, I thought that I was going to retire in Savannah, Georgia. 2008, that's where I was going. I was going to make sure that Fort Benning was my last assignment. Not Fort Benning. What's the other one? What is it? What's the one?
Fort Stewart.
Thank you, Fort Stewart. I was going to make sure that Fort Stewart was my last assignment. And so 2008, I went on a site survey. I spent 4 days, Labor Day weekend, 2008, down there in Savannah, thinking that this is where I'm going to retire and I'm just going to go check it out. By the time I left Savannah, I knew I was not living in Savannah. Savannah was pretty on TV because of the moss on the oak trees, and it was pretty because of all the architecture, the houses. But when I went there and I spoke to people who live there, I don't like taxes. But it's a Commonwealth state. I'm from Virginia. Virginia is a Commonwealth state. That tells me I'm never living in another Commonwealth state. So after speaking to people, after being there for 4 days, I was like, Savannah is a nice place to visit, not the place that I'm going to live. Yeah. And so I had to continue doing the research. Where can I settle down and I'm going to be cool with it? It turned out to be Nashville.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, family, and you got to factor in schools, and if you still have children, in school age, that's going to be a challenge because you don't just want to settle anywhere for the job, and your children are suffering because it's a very poor, school district. So those things to consider.
And I'll tell you, so I'm the facilitator, the interviewer here, but I do also have a similar experience in transition, and I would invite that person also to. We all got to do some soul searching and figure out what is best for us, and really, ultimately, it's what those top variables are for that individual. And I think that having that knowledge base, like VeShannah did, of going there and really looking at it and making a decision as to whether that was the place or not. Sometimes there's a family reason. This has to be it, and I'll figure out the rest of my life around it. That's okay too. It's whatever's best for you. Some people want to chase the money, and so they're willing to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And that's okay. There's no wrong answer. It's just your answer. And so I think that that's incredibly important. So Courtney asked real quick what the interview resource was again. So if you're on LinkedIn and at the very top, you've got some tabs. One of the tabs says jobs. And when you click on that, you'll see that there is another tab inside of that tab that says interview prep. And when you go to that, you'll be able to, again, ask questions. You can answer, or you can respond to answers there in paper or in the written word, I should say. And then you can also do the interview prep questions in a video state. So it's really good. So anyway, listen, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I'm so thankful. So many people have come on and asked so many questions. And I think we'll go back, and I'll invite VeShannah and Don to jump on there afterward if they have time and answer any questions that they'd like in the comment section. But I definitely wanted to leave prior to with maybe a military transition tip that really helped them. And if you would mind, maybe I can start with VeShannah. Any particular tip that you can share with the group?
Plan, research, prepare. That's the biggest thing, because you want to retire with confidence. And the people who don't retire with confidence are the people who didn't plan, prepare, and turn it into an actual process. They're the people who thought that they were just going to get out and the next day was going to be the same as the day before. And it's not. You really do have to do the work.
Yeah, no, that's great. Don?
Once you take off that uniform, it's off. Nobody cares that you were a sergeant major. They'll respect your service, but nobody's going to care that you were sergeant major or colonel or sergeant first class, anything. So, you just got to take off that uniform and leave it off. It's not going to hang on the rafters anywhere, and just, be prepared to sell the person that you are. You come to any organization, with great, talents, with great personality, great character. All those things matter. Not being a sergeant major. That's, it's a nice coffee conversation, some good stories about what you've done, but at the end of the day, they want to know that you can come in and be a part of the team.
No, that's great. That's terrific advice. And listen, speaking of advice, I mean, I've thought so much of both of you throughout my career. You're both, great friends, and I think the world of you, and I'm just in awe of the great things that you continue to do. So I'm so thankful that you took time out of your busy schedules to participate in our interview session. And maybe we could have you back on in a few months, and you can, give us some more of your advice and sage and wise words.
They were doing the AR 670-1 updates. So all of us right now are violating 670.
And you know what? It's all good.
I know, right?
It's all good, So listen, thank you so much to everyone who's asked questions. Very much appreciate that, and recognize that you two are busy. So the fact that you stuck with us, asked some terrific questions, interacted on the side, it means a lot to others as well. And so I want to also remind you that we are on LinkedIn, but we're also on YouTube, HireMilitary, all one word, and over on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, HireMilitary US. So I invite you to come on back next time. We're on almost every single afternoon, and we do everything we can to bring you the very best of information so that you can make your transition successful and that you can have a good start to the next chapter of your life. So again, VeShannah, Don, thanks for your time, and we are out of here.